Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host, who is secretly a ghost, Kamal Onor. Now, have you ever questioned if you have what it takes to be a published author? Have you ever wondered what you need to do to become good enough to be able to be publishable? Well, before we head into the storm, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Help spread this channel, it means a lot. With that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, Writes.
So today I'm going to be talking all about what it actually takes to be a published author, what it actually takes to be good enough to be able to have your work published in publications, to have your work be selected among everyone else who is submitting their work to magazines and to publishers. What separates people who have publishing careers from people who never have their work published? Get rid of the ideas that you have to be born with some X factor. You have to have been born reading in the womb. You have to have been born with an incredible story to tell. Because none of this is true. So if none of it is true, then what do you actually have to do to become good? What do you actually have to do to become good enough to have your work in publications, to have your work in print, to have your work be selected for publication? Well, among the idea of you have to be reading as much as you possibly can and writing as much as you can can do all these things, but the honest truth is that it is not always the best writer who is published. It is not always the smartest writer who is published. If it's not the best writer and it's not the smartest writer, then who is being published? Because the truth is that so many authors, so many people who pursue writing as a career, so many people who go to school for writing, so many people who get their master's degrees, who get their BFA in writing, so many people will never have their work in New York Times sellers list. So many people will never have their work published. And so today I'm answering the question of what it actually takes to be publishable as an author, to be publishable as a writer. What are the bare essentials that you have to do and keep doing to make sure that you are good enough to be published? Because again, it's not always the best writer, it's not always the most confident writer, it's not always the writer who knows the most literary terminology, it's not always the writer who has perfect grammar, it's not always the writer who has the best story who's even published. And so while there are a lot of things that you can do to improve your work, and there are certainly a lot of things that you can do throughout your entire career, throughout your entire life to continue to improve your writing, the number one thing that gets people to be publishable and be at a level where they are capable of having their work published is this information is going to either inspire you or it's going to make you incredibly frustrated. So the number one thing that you have to do if you want to be good enough to be publishable as a writer, to have your work be published in print, to have your work be at a level where it's good enough to be published, you have to keep writing. Yes, shock, gasp, and ah. The idea that you actually have to keep writing. This might seem obvious to a lot of people that of course you have to keep writing, because in order for you to actually put yourself into a situation, to put yourself into a position to be successful as an author, you have to keep writing and you have to keep putting yourself out there. You have to be one of those people who continues to write and actually does the work, because so many people talk for years about how I have an idea for a novel, I just haven't had the time to sit down and write it. I don't have the time to sit down and write. Well, if you are not writing, if you're not actually submitting your work, you're never going to have your work be published. Your work is never going to be at a publishable level unless you are willing to continuously put yourself out there. Because I know that I am not the best writer. I know that I am not the smartest writer. It would be very narcissistic of me to think that I am the greatest writer who's ever lived, which I know this is not the case. But what has allowed me to accumulate so many publications, what has allowed me to have what has allowed me to have a publishing career so far is the fact that I have continued writing, is the fact that I have continued to grow and I have continued to improve on my craft. I have continued to improve on my ability to write. I have continued to improve in my professionalism. I have continued to improve in my ability to market myself. And these are all things that you have to do along your own journey as an author. And if you're not doing the writing, if you're not submitting your work, if you let life get in the way, if you put your creative endeavors to the side, if you take your manuscript and you put it in a shoebox and you never visit it again, that work is never going to be published. So you have to understand that the people who become successful as authors, the people whose work gets to a level where they are able to be published, the people whose work is in fact published on a regular basis are the people who actually do the work, the people who are continuing to write, and the people who are actually doing the hard work of writing. It's not always the most talented writer. It's not always the most intelligent writer. And the truth is, so many of us, and this is something that I certainly experienced during all my time of studying creative writing in undergrad as well as graduate school, was that I never felt like I was the best writer. Even when I came to grad school after having finished my undergrad in creative writing, I felt that my first semester during grad school, I was convinced that the director of the program was going to come find me and tell me that they meant to accept someone named Jamal Bronor. And I was terrified because I felt that I didn't belong. I felt that my work just wasn't good enough, and I didn't belong. I felt like a fraud. And this is another thing that many authors deal with, is that imposter syndrome. But the reason why I have accumulated 30 plus publications throughout my writing career so far is the fact that I have continued to write, and I have continued to have this as a passion. I've continued to make writing a priority. So if you want to see your work in print, if you want to see your work published, you have to continue to make writing a priority. And if you don't, this is what's going to lead you to never see your work in publications. You have to make writing a priority. And so that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep it spooky. And of course, here's your writing prompt for sticking all the way through the video. Jack ran to his desk filled with blank. So set your timer and start writing. Thank you so much.